Hello and shalom, everyone. Welcome to Exploring the Motherland. I'm your host, Garth, and the date is wrong. That is a mishap on my end. Today is March 7th, 2025. If you are new here to Exploring the Motherland, the purpose of Exploring the Motherland is to promote the message of Quest to Unite Africa. Now, you are probably asking, what is the message of Quest to Unite Africa, or our main goal? And that would be to bring economic development and critical infrastructure to the continent of Africa and the African diaspora as a whole. And we do that through four main pillar strategies, and that would be business, technological innovation, medicine, and cultural engagement. The purpose of the show is to keep you up to date with all of the news that is happening on the continent of Africa that relates to our mission. So let's get started. All 54 African countries excluded from U.S. 2025 visa waiver list. And here is the article. I will put it in the chat. And then read some of it, and then we'll watch the clips. All 54 African countries excluded from U.S. 2025 visa waiver list. On Monday, the United States released its list of countries eligible for the 2025 visa waiver program. 40 nations from Europe, Asia, and parts of the Middle East secured visa-free entry into the U.S. However, none of the African nations, 54 African countries, were not included. The exclusion of African countries is nothing new, but it reflects the ongoing challenges African nations face in securing easier access to the U.S. For years, visa rejection rates for African applicants have been on the rise, with U.S. authorities citing concerns over immigration violations, fraud, and security risks. All the, usual xenophobic tropes relating to Africans and, African Americans. And we are now seeing the rise of xenophobia and an exclusion of certain groups, majority us, us in the African diaspora and the African continent. Since Trump's return to office, his administration has doubled down on strict border control and mass deportations, with African and Latin American immigrants bearing the brunt of these policies.
Hey guys, more worries for Nigeria as Donald Trump administration excludes Nigeria and other African countries from visa-free entry into US amid mass deportation. Why 40 countries, including European, Asian, and select Middle Eastern nations, secured visa-free entry into the US, no African nation made the cut. Welcome back to Prospect Channels TV. Thank you for this coming out here. If you're just joining us, please kindly subscribe to this channel and don't forget to give us a thumbs up. The United States government has officially released its 2025 visa waiver program, VWP list, with Nigeria and other African nations completely excluded, continuing the Donald Trump administration's hardline immigration stance. Why 40 countries, including European, Asian, and select Middle Eastern nations, secured visa-free entry into the US, no African nation made the cut. Even major US allies like the United Kingdom were also left out, although British citizens remain eligible under specific conditions. This latest decision follows the Trump administration's intensified deportation drive, which has seen thousands of undocumented Nigerians, Ghanaians, and other African migrants forcefully removed from the US in recent months. Under Trump's previous tenure, visa restrictions on Nigerians tightened significantly, with the administration citing high rates of visa overstays and security concerns. With Trump now back in power, his immigration policies are once again prioritizing strict border control, mass deportations, and reduced entry access for Africa and Latin American countries. Despite keeping Nigeria and other African countries off the list, the US State Department added Romania to the 2025 visa waiver program, signaling a shift towards prioritizing countries with strong diplomatic ties and enhanced border security measures. According to the US Bureau of Consular Affairs, the visa waiver program allows more citizens of participating countries to travel to the US for up to 90 days without a visa. However, travelers must still obtain prior electronic system for travel authorization approval before entry. For Nigerians, this latest exclusion further cements their restricted access to the US under the Trump administration, following previous visa bans and additional travel.
All right, I put the link to that video. That sister's talking more about, Nigeria, because that's where she's from. And this other video will give a broader reach of this matter. And again, this is just, for lack of a better term, burning bridges. The US is burning bridges between the continent of Africa. And, also pretty soon we are going to be, well, I'm not going to say be hated, but this is just basically a dog whistle to all African descendants that the US doesn't want you here, and they are trying to make America very white again. And if it isn't apparent with Trump's policies and just even Biden's policies with allowing, Ukrainians and those folks in that Middle Eastern nation that we shall not talk about, they are all refugees coming here without visas and living here and getting support from America while we are being shut out. So this will, backfire on the West and in America specifically, because this is a direct retaliation, or I wouldn't say retaliation. This is direct war against Africa and African descendants, and just signaling that our exit here is pretty soon.
And now turning our attention, it looks like President Donald Trump's administration is leaving no stone unturned to show their distrust and discrimination against Africans. Why do we say so? Because his administration has excluded Africa from this year's visa waiver program. In a list reportedly released earlier this week, the Trump administration has excluded all 54 countries of the world's second largest continent from eligibility for a visa waiver that allows travelers to enter the United States for up to 90 days without a formal visa. In sharp contrast, the Trump administration has included nearly 40 countries in this year's list, most of which are US allies from Europe and Asia. This has raised eyebrows over the ongoing challenges African nations face in securing easier access to the US. For years, visa rejection rates for African applicants have been on the rise. Reports indicate that nearly 60% of all students from African countries who applied to study at universities in the United States were denied the requisite F1 visa in 2023. The US authorities have reportedly cited concerns over immigration violations, fraud, and security risks as reasons for rejecting African visas. Moreover, reports suggest countries with high numbers of visa overstays, asylum seekers, or economic instability have also traditionally faced stricter entry standards to the US. But interestingly, the US has not raised such concerns for its allies such as Israel, Netherlands, Finland, Germany, France, Norway, South Korea, and Japan, among others, who are included in this year's visa waiver program. So why exclude Africa, a continent that is rapidly growing, has a young demography, and is rich in minerals that drive America's economic interests? Some link this to Trump's policy of doubling down on illegal migration and his hardline stance on border control. Moreover, the exclusion of Africa from the visa waiver program might also be a larger political move to restrict entry from countries that Trump feels have security challenges and implications. This action might further complicate relations between the US and Africa, which have already been deteriorating under Trump. Trump has not been close to any African leader. As president, he has never set foot on the continent. He has made derogatory remarks toward African nations, and in the first month of his second tenure, he has already created diplomatic tensions with South Africa. He has also reportedly begun downsizing the US Africa Command, while he has also frozen foreign aid to several African nations. In light of these developments, the decision to restrict Africans from visa-free entry, which would otherwise promote tourism, business, and cultural exchanges with the US, raises serious concerns about the fairness and legitimacy of such policies. Will this policy further deteriorate US influence on the continent? We will keep you posted.
Oh, it definitely will deteriorate diplomatic ties to Africa. And again, this development is just another instance of Trump's failed diplomatic strategies. This isolationist policy will backfire tremendously. Trump alienating Africans from visa waivers will backfire. As a result, African leaders will start cutting off strategic minerals such as uranium, which is used to create nuclear energy, gold, and other rare earth minerals from the United States. Moreover, African crops that the United States once had access to will be completely denied from America. So basically, America is going to be cut off from its wealth because all of its wealth was from Africa for pennies on the dollar. This is a very stupid move by Trump, and this just shows you the pride of the West as a whole, because America is a representation of the West as a whole. And, you know, all the other European countries are vassal states, but that's changing soon. As you see, they are fighting one another against this whole conflict in Ukraine and Russia, but that's not the scope of this show. But you could see how they are turning on each other, and everything is being reversed. Just like we used to fight against one another and turn on one another, now it's being brought upon them. And now we are having access to the continent, and we are going to be able to create relationships with our brothers and sisters while they are distracted fighting amongst one another. And as Kara says, and as Quest Unite Africa, our ethos is relationship first, and everything else will follow. Okay, next story. UN Food Agency shuts Southern Africa Bureau after USAID cuts. Link to this article. And the article reads, UN agency shuts Southern Africa Bureau after U.S. aid cuts. The World Food Program office in Johannesburg has shut down following major reductions in U.S. aid assistance. The move comes after the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump announced last week that it was terminating 90% of U.S. agency for international development contracts. Basically, the United States, USAID. The administration cited a failure to advance America's national interests and effectively halted $60 billion in humanitarian spending worldwide. The WFP will merge its Southern and East Africa operations into a single regional office in Nairobi, Kenya. Spokesperson Thompson Fury told the Associated Press despite the changes, he emphasized that food programs will continue, reaffirming the WFP's commitment to serving vulnerable communities efficiently. The U.S. has been the largest donor to the WFP, contributing approximately $4.5 billion of its $9.8 billion budget last year. So basically, this just leaves other nations such as China and Russia to be bigger donors in Africa, but obviously I would prefer that African nations start, doing business together and finding ways that they could feed the continent of Africa at a cheaper, more efficient way than using, bureaucracy and relying on foreign entities. But that's neither here nor there. And let's start the videos.
The World Food Program WFP of the United Nations will close its Southern African office due to financial constraints. Typically, the US contributes around half of WFP's yearly funding, but it is currently scaling back on foreign aid as part of President Donald Trump's America First policy. Thomson Phiri, a regional spokesperson, announced that WFP will combine its Eastern and Southern African operations in Nairobi, but this will not affect ongoing support for millions in Southern Africa facing drought. He noted the importance of maximizing resources but did not directly link the changes to the cuts in aid, stating that the overall funding outlook is tighter. The Trump administration plans to cut over 90% of foreign aid contracts from the U.S. Agency for International Development.
It's more than 10,000 miles from Washington to this washing line. Yet it was funding that came from the US capital to a South African charity called GRIP, which helped save Bungi, a survivor of domestic abuse.
GRIP helped so many ladies because even I went there, it was full there. There was kids, mothers, it was full. And I think someone just helped GRIP. I don't want to see GRIP another day falling down. Yeah.
GRIP is a program that was 52% funded by USAID and the PEPFAR Fund for HIV and AIDS. The money was for the prevention of violence and HIV transmission and to support women like Bungi. And these are the faces, the real people affected because of the worldwide overnight cut by the Trump administration of these funds. The day we got to GRIP outside Johannesburg, they'd been forced to lay off 21 staff.
It's crazy how our communities are really going to suffer from this. I don't know what we're going to do.
Even today, I admitted a lady. She slept on the street last night.
terrible.
But for us to get, now she's safe, she's here, so it's great news.
And from that shelter, we were taken to the police station where GRIP has trauma rooms.
We've tried to create like a nice, peaceful space, made it quite colorful so that it's much easier for people to come and report gender-based violence at the police station. They don't have to stand in a queue outside. They can come straight to the care room and report anything that they need to report to us in a nice, quiet, confidential space.
And apart from the police stations, they have trauma rooms in 5 local hospitals which are now at risk, and the prevention program has been terminated.
It's very difficult to tell a rape survivor that, unfortunately we've lost funding and so you no longer have access to your social worker. How do you do that? So funding can stop immediately, but certainly the type of work we do, we cannot just suspend activities with immediate effect because we're assisting people and these people are humans and they need us.
South Africa was one of the largest recipients of the PEPFAR fund set up by President George W. Bush, helping turn the tide of a disease that had wreaked havoc in this country.
There is no doubt that PEPFAR has had a profound impact on this pandemic and, in my opinion, has made America great. The place we were in 2000 when PEPFAR was born as a response, it would be such a tragedy if we went back to anything like that again.
Already services are disappearing. This clinic closed overnight. In Johannesburg, one doctor told us HIV testing has largely collapsed. There is still such a sense of disbelief that this has happened, that these services were closed down overnight with no notice. And while the Trump administration has made it very clear that this is about putting America's needs first, one international aid agency said to us the short-sightedness of that is that these diseases, HIV, TB, malaria, polio, Ebola, they don't just stop at country borders, they get on planes. An HIV vaccine trial funded by PEPFAR has closed, and while in this community pharmacy they're trialling pre-exposure prophylaxis PrEP services, and it's looking good, people are coming to get their pills, what will happen when they're ready to roll it out? Will the infrastructure even be there?
The message to the South African government is we need a plan, and the plan is not simply grit your teeth and absorb this into current services. We need much more than that. When it comes to HIV, we are doing superbly. That will disappear. And HIV has gone from the biggest killer of men and women in the country to about number 7 on the list. We will go straight back to number 1 in the next year. And with it, TB will go up, maternal mortality will go up, and infant mortality will go up.
And how will the loss of these services even be counted? The Kumbulani Centre in Cape Town is a program for HIV-positive children and young people.
All right, you can watch the rest of that video. I put the link in the chat. So as it pertains to this development, the United States cutting off Africa just gives Russia and China the opportunities to fulfill that need. But however, I believe it now is the time that African countries and leaders find ways to start making initiatives to help feed Africans and to meet their needs as it pertains to medicine, any prevention, being advocates for, any domestic violence or any other needs that our people on the continent need. And this is basically why Quest Unite Africa was created. We are trying to help our brothers and sisters make strategic relationships that help them with their needs and initiatives. Basically, for this food program, we could create an agricultural initiative to help feed Africans, all the African countries and the African diaspora as a whole. We already have an affiliated group that is already made training in agricultural techniques and learning how to grow food and how to restore land. That would be Nature's Legacy Garden. You should check them out. I will put the link in the chat. Here you go. And as I said before, let me finish my comment. because, you know, there's just so many ideas and ways we could all help out and help each other. It makes no sense to rely on other nations to supply money for food, as the sister Nori asked, why was South Africa allowing the U.S. to provide so many services for their people? Exactly why? You know, that's a good question. Why haven't African nations started, you know, supplying their people with their own food? And, you know, why are we relying on foreign entities? Colonialism has been a part of it. And now that the chains of colonialism are being broken, as we see, especially in the Sahel, now it's the time for us to step up and, you know, come together and find ways to help support ourselves. And, you know, this again is a time for the diaspora to help our brothers and sisters create initiatives to fulfill their needs. That's basically what Quest Unite Africa was created to do. We are, you know, especially in technological innovation, but more so here is medicine. Medicine correlates to food, and that's where we are needed. So I hope this is making it clearer and conveys the message of us that our future is no longer in the West and it is in Africa, and we have to start aligning our thought process to that and how we can provide help in that effort. Okay, next article. South Africa investigates treason claims against Afrikaner groups. And here's the article. I'll put it in the chat. All right, and the article reads, South African police have launched an investigation into high treason claims against Afrikaner minority lobby groups Atra Forum and Solidarity, which are accused of spreading false information to the U.S. government about a recently passed land ownership law. Basically, if you haven't, you don't know about this law, it's basically a land exploration law to give back land to other, you know, Africans, mainly us, because, you know, basically think of it as eminent domain, because a lot of the land was stolen by Afrikaners and other groups, you know, of European ancestry. I believe the metrics was something like 90% of the land owned in South Africa is owned by Afrikaners and whites, while 10% is owned by us and Black Southern Africans. And, you know, this law by President Ramaphosa was to, you know, counteract that balance and bring it back to restoration. But obviously the Afrikaners and those people who are in the land and interlopers are mad because they're losing their privilege and their rights to a land that they don't deserve. And basically, the South African government and police have, you know, done a probe to see if they committed treason by going over to America and lobbying for America to cut off aid on that basis. That's basically me paraphrasing it in a nutshell, but the videos will explain it a lot better.
The South African Police Service branch, the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, commonly known as the Hawks, are investigating about 4 dockets of high treason, understood to be against the Afrikaner interest groups, AfriForum and Solidarity. This is in connection with the spread of misleading information in the United States surrounding the Expropriation Act. Now, this follows the recent criminal charges of treason that have been laid out by political parties and individuals. against the AFRI group called AfriForum. They're accusing the lobby group of economic sabotage. In recent weeks, AfriForum and trade union Solidarity have made headlines for calling on the United States to act against South African policies, particularly the Land Expropriation Act. Now, the Afrikaner interest group was in Washington meeting with the officials from Trump's administration. The AfriForum is in fact lobbying for the country to intervene and to hold the African National Congress accountable for what they've described as a threat to Afrikaans culture. Now, Trump in fact cut off aid to the country after threatening to do so in a social media post, claiming that certain classes of people in South Africa were being treated very badly. He also issued an executive order offering a refugee status to the Afrikaners. The AfriForum has said that there were no legal grounds for the charges of treason that have been brought against it. The AfriForum CEO, Callie Cryle, has said that he would not lose any sleep over it, and the organization is ready for the Hawks to investigate these charges.
I was informed by the media that the Hawks are investigating complaints of high treason against AfriForum. I will not be having any sleepless nights over this, as these complaints are baseless. If the state, however, goes ahead with this, it will make us stronger. It would confirm the point that there are ANC leaders that are abusing their power to govern against certain sections of the population.
For all the latest news, download the VON app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Oh, wow, what a big shocker. He won't lose sleep to being, xenophobic and them, overstepping their boundary, basically collusion, because you can't go to another country, advocating for another government to intervene into your own country's policy. I mean, that is basically is treason, because they may be privy to information that the U.S. doesn't know about that shouldn't be conveyed by anyone other than a diplomat that was sent from South Africa.
To one of our top stories now, the Hawks have confirmed that 4 dockets have been opened to investigate possible high treason. Hawks head Godfrey Libya says 4 complaints were received relating to misinformation about South Africa's Land Expropriation Act, among other issues. The complaints come on the back of a recent trip by AfriForum and other groups to meet White House officials over issues affecting Afrikaners. Let's speak to the MK party's Ntlamulo Ndlela. Ntlamulo, a very good evening to you. Thanks very much for your time. You initially laid your complaint of treason about 3 weeks ago or so. What has happened since?
Yes, no, thank you, Vuyo. We did open a case in the Western Cape, specifically Cape Town, for treason against the AfriForum, and this is based on the, as defined by South African law, the Righteous Assemblies Act 17 of 1956, which includes acts like instigating foreign intervention in internal affairs with intentions to harm the state. And this is exactly what has transpired here and what has unfolded based on the AfriForum's activities, which have caused harm to the state and the country.
But what have they said or done in that makes it treasonous for you?
I've just unpacked. In terms of the law, they went and, in this case, solicited foreign intervention. And it's very clearly articulated in the prescripts of the law that if you, solicit foreign intervention that end up meddling or lead to the meddling of internal affairs, those activities then harm the state. Automatically, that falls within the prescripts of treason. AfriForum, in this case, went and misrepresented the facts pertaining to the expropriation bill, which then led to a situation that had constraints, dire constraints on the relationship with Africa. Whereas, such issues are supposed to be handled via proper diplomatic channels, which is what we would have expected. But in this case, AfriForum, what they've done is they have actually put the country in a situation with the U.S. that is treasonous based on their acts.
Well, of course, I mean, AfriForum is on record calling your claim rather absurd.
Well, we'll see the absurdity of it when the law catches up with them. But we're quite confident. And if you look at the activities and what also led to what has just happened a couple of days ago, where foreign aid has now been cut off the back of these calls by the AfriForum to punish the leadership, and also, for instance, even with MK party leaders, and misrepresenting the facts as it pertains to the preparation bill that led to these executive orders. So we can't take such things lightly. The AfriForum, we know, is just a grouping that represents a few races, and they are no different to being renegades that are very similar to, in this case, AWB and the likes of those kind of institutions. I mean, if we look at Caligrio Guadalupe today, he's no different to a Eugene Terblanche. And this is what these people represent. They don't represent unity whatsoever. And we need to call them out. We can't afford to have institutions and organizations such as this, and we don't even understand if they still actually meet the real requirements of why they actually even formed this so-called AfriForum in the first place. Because they're not here for unity. They want to take us back to apartheid, and we're not going to allow that. We can't allow AfriForum to continue doing what they're doing and the kind of acts that they're doing. And also something to also note, you look at the Freedom Front Plus, who says that they, in effect, condone and commend AfriForum for what they're doing. This is the GNU government that now we have. We have a minister, effectively, that's in support of treason against the state. So a party that is supporting treason acts is part of this so-called GNU of Ramaphosa. And then, we then call this a government of national unity. Is this really unity? No.
How watertight do you think your case is, or is it a question of throw off the dice and then see what happens?
Look, it's not a throw of the dice. We're going to be assisting the police in this case. So I'll share the following with you. When we opened up the case locally in Cape Town, immediately, whilst we were busy engaging with the police there, the Hawks intervened and they walked into the office just to show you the veracity and the seriousness of this case. And we then obviously had to share the affidavit with them, and they said that this is a national priority case, and they took it upon themselves to say it's not going to be handled by the Western Cape, it's going to be handled specifically at national. As of 4 days ago, we've also received the person who's going to be allocated this case. In this case is Mr. Malan, who's going to oversee this case. And from what we've submitted, and also what we also have, which will assist, is very damning information that should lead to the arrest of all the members, of all the directors of AfriForum.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
I like how, yes, bro, Greg, we are watching the setup and them falling into their own trap in real time. And as I wrote in my notes, AfriForum overstepped its boundary by lobbying for another country to get involved in another country's affairs. Furthermore, this is a violation of South Africa's sovereignty. And as the brother said, they are just stoking hate and divisiveness. And, you don't think this could start a civil war in South Africa? If they're lying about the government and what it's trying to do for its own people and own country. And what makes it worse is they are a minority. And this just gives South Africa and other African nations reasons to start highly scrutinizing certain demographics, i.e., Europeans who have no ties to Africa. They're not indigenous to the land. They are there based on occupation and colonialism. Furthermore, this proves legislation like the land reform policy are appropriate to get rid of, policies that were once based on apartheid and colonialism, and its ill effects plaguing the country of South Africa. Next article. ECOWAS team leaves Guinea-Bissau after threat of expulsion. That's the link to that article, and if I forgot, I think I did forget to put the link for the last video in here. And here it is. And the article reads, ECOWAS team leaves Guinea-Bissau after threat of expulsion. A mission from the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has left Guinea-Bissau saying the president had threatened to expel it. It said it had prepared a draft agreement on a roadmap for elections and had started presenting it to the stakeholders for their consent. But the team decided to leave early on Saturday morning after President Amaro Sissoka Embalo's threat. It says it will now present its report to the ECOWAS president, which is Bolo Tinubu, the Nigerian puppet president, including a proposal for an agreement leading to inclusive and peaceful elections. So basically, ECOWAS was going to Guinea-Bissau and telling the president he wasn't, implementing democracy right, and they needed to tell him how to do it. And he got, obviously he got annoyed and told them to leave and that he may expel from ECOWAS, which is which a lot of African countries are now doing. Our brothers and sisters in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have done that, and now that influence is spreading. As I said before, Chad will probably all now join the Alliance of Sahel states soon, another vassal state for the French and European influence. But let me not go on a tangent because so much stuff is happening and we now see the shift. It's now more apparent than ever.
A mission from the West African regional bloc ECOWAS has left Guinea-Bissau after the president threatened to expel it. The team was sent to the country last month to help it reach a political consensus on how to conduct elections this year. It said it had prepared a draft agreement on a roadmap for elections and had started presenting it to stakeholders for their consent. But they decided to leave early on Saturday morning after President Umaro Sissoco Embalo's threat. The president has not responded to the bloc's accusation. There's been heightened tension in the country over when Embalo's 5-year mandate ends. The opposition says his term as president expired last week, but the Supreme Court of Justice ruled that it ends on the 4th of September. A new round of general elections was due to take place last November, but Embalo postponed them and has since announced they'll take place on the 30th of November this year. The opposition has opposed the delay. ECOWAS says it will now present its report to the bloc's president, including a proposal for an agreement leading to inclusive and peaceful elections.
From East Africa, we shift focus to the West, where Guinea-Bissau has locked horns with the pro-West ECOWAS bloc. Now, the country's president, Umaro Sissoco Embalo, has threatened to expel an ECOWAS political mission sent to the country to reach a consensus on how to conduct elections in Guinea-Bissau this year. The tiny West African nation, like many of its neighbors, has a history of coups, and these fears were reignited after a dispute over when President Embalo's term, which began in 2020, should end. Elections in the country that were scheduled for November 2024 were postponed by the president. The opposition in Guinea-Bissau claims President Embalo's term should have expired last week, while the country's Supreme Court of Justice ruled that it ends on the 4th of September. The opposition is calling this delay unconstitutional. The dispute over the president's tenure has heightened tensions that risk unrest. Mbalo claims that there have been attempts to overthrow him. In December of 2023, gunfire and clashes erupted in the capital city, after which he dissolved the opposition-controlled parliament. Interestingly, President Mbalo's latest rift with ECOWAS comes just days after he visited Moscow for talks with Russian President Putin. The two countries vowed to bolster economic and security ties.
We in Russia are reliable partners. Today I am here, Mr. President, to reaffirm the bonds of friendship that we have between the Russian people and the people of Guinea-Bissau, this fraternal relationship that has always existed.
We are available to always strengthen our bond of cooperation and that with Africa too. I know that you have always maintained relations, not only with Guinea-Bissau, with the entire African continent. And that we owe our independence to you, directly or indirectly. For this we are very grateful.
I know that you have elections this year. I very much hope that the Bissauans will support you and that you will continue to serve as president. The good relations that have developed in recent years between our states are largely associated with your name and are developing with your support.
Russia has also sent thousands of mercenaries to support military leaders in West Africa and help them fight insurgents. Now, among them are Mali's Assimi Goita, Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore, and Niger's General Chiani. Now, these three countries under their military leaders have officially left the West African bloc after the year of diplomatic tensions. The split was sparked just after the three junta-ruled states refused ECOWAS demands to restore diplomatic rule. Now, after the latest standoff with ECOWAS, will Guinea-Bissau be the next to quit the pro-West bloc? If it does, it will be a major setback for the 50-year-old bloc, which is considered Africa's most important regional group. So with fears of a conflict and a coup now in Guinea-Bissau, did President Mbalo rush to Putin for security aid? Will Russia now send mercenaries to another West African nation?
Merci beaucoup. Hi, how are you?
Oh, shocker. Look who's coming in to, help out, As I said, shift in diplomatic ties. Africa is where the power lies. I rhymed. As I said before, now that the West is becoming very, burdensome and just becoming straight out arrogant and completely meddling in African affairs, and now African countries see that they no longer need to be effective, no longer need the West to be effective to help, take back their country and to, economically develop and to build critical infrastructure. They are cutting ties, and now they are, doing different strategic relationships with other nations or within themselves, such as the Alliance of Sahel States. As I said, ECOWAS meddling in Guinea-Bissau's electoral process will cause the country's leaders to cut ties with ECOWAS if he has a second term. ECOWAS is a failed economic bloc that continues to seek influence and power in a region that no longer desires them to be there. Guinea-Bissau could be another nation that leaves ECOWAS and starts fostering more strategic relationships with Russia and China and other African nations. And the article for this, Russia is a reliable partner, Guinea-Bissau leader says. Bissau Guinean President Umaro Sissoco lauded Russia as a reliable partner during a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Wednesday. We thank you for increasing the quota for our military personnel, police officers, and students. Some Russian companies are also interested in developing relations with Guinea-Bissau. Trade between Russia and African countries grew by 10% in 2024. Putin announced during the meeting he emphasized the need for stronger economic ties between Russia and Africa and expressed hope for accelerating growth, citing solid foundations and promoting opportunities. The Russian president noted Russia and Guinea-Bissau have signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate in fields of general education, science, and innovation, as well as vocational training, Moscow announced on Wednesday.
Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed his Guinea-Bissau counterpart Umaro Sissoco Embalo to Moscow on Wednesday. The talks come as Russia continues its drive to build economic and security ties with countries in West and Central Africa. The two men reportedly discussed developing cooperation between their countries, as well as international and regional issues. Russian news agency TASS says potential cooperation includes in mineral resources, infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and fishing. Last year, trade turnover between Russia and the African continent continued to grow and increased by 10%. However, trade and economic relations between our countries certainly requires careful attention from both sides. And I very much hope that we will be able to agree that they will gain momentum. There's good groundwork and good opportunities here, and many of our companies are showing growing interest in working in your market. Embalo has traveled to Russia on several occasions at the invitation of Putin. Us and Russia, we're partners for sure. Today, I find myself here to reaffirm this bond of friendship that we have between Russian people and the people of Guinea-Bissau. This is a fraternal relationship that has always existed. Embalo's visit to Russia comes as the opposition threatens to paralyze the country on Thursday.
Shifting our focus, as the West loses its shine and influence in Africa, Russia has significantly made inroads into the continent. It has been supporting Africa's developmental and security needs. In the latest, Russian President Vladimir Putin held talks with his counterpart from Guinea-Bissau, a country located on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean in West Africa. In a phone conversation with the Guinea-Bissau's president, Umaro Embalo, Putin reportedly discussed expanding trade and investment between the two countries, as well as boosting humanitarian aid to Guinea-Bissau. In a post on social media platform X, Guinea-Bissau's Embalo said that he had a long telephone conversation with Putin that was primarily focused on the international geopolitical situation and on ways to strengthen the bilateral ties between the two countries. Now, Moscow and Guinea-Bissau have maintained diplomatic ties since 1974, when the former Soviet Union aided the West African country in gaining independence from the colonizer Portugal. Since then, the two countries have been close to each other. Both countries also signed a military agreement with each other in November of 2018. Last year, Guinea-Bissau's president visited Moscow during Russia's annual Victory Day parade in May. The West African country's president urged Putin to allow soldiers from his country to receive training in Russia during their meeting. Putin had announced plans to expand his government's scholarship program for more students from Guinea-Bissau to study in Russia. In turn, Guinea-Bissau assured Putin that the country would remain a reliable partner in Africa. Now, the latest exchange between Putin and Guinea-Bissau's Embalo comes as Russia seeks to expand its influence in Africa amid growing anti-West sentiment. It has been leveraging economic, energy, agriculture, and military ties and investments in order to be seen as a serious counterweight to the US and its allies' presence in the continent. Last week, the Russian president spoke by phone with his Egyptian counterpart, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and discussed the establishment of the Russian industrial zone in the Suez Canal economic zone, as well as the construction of the Al-Dabba nuclear power plant. Now, earlier this month, Putin also hosted the Central African Republic's president in Moscow and discussed ways to deepen the two countries' ties. In a bid to boost its diplomatic presence on the continent, the country is also set to open 3 new embassies in Africa this year. This is in Niger, Sierra Leone, and South Sudan. Reports suggest that currently Russia operates only 43 diplomatic and consular missions in the continent. This is in countries such as Algeria, Angola, Cameroon, the DRC, Djibouti, Egypt, Gabon, Kenya, Guinea-Bissau, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, and Libya, among others. Moreover, Russia has also been supporting several African governments by providing them with mercenaries and arms to fight terrorists, and they've also provided military trainers and instructors to advise on operations. Economic ties have also deepened between Russia and Africa, with trade surging to a record $24.5 billion in the year 2024. So as Africa dumps the West and turns to Russia for its needs, will Moscow be able to fulfill Africa's dreams amid the intensifying war in Ukraine?
We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. Routed as the minimum.
Fair use, fair use. I don't know what they're going to do with that music, but again, let me give you my note. The West is losing influence day by day in Africa. This is an example of why relationships and partnerships that are beneficial are crucial. As noted in the video, Russia helped Guinea-Bissau break away from Portuguese colonialism and influence, and in return, they fostered a relationship and a bond that goes further than any Western country has presented, and they've treated them with respect, so they are willing to do business with them and to make initiatives with them for the time being. And next and last article, Zimbabwe turns to Russia's Putin for nuclear power. And here is the link to the article. And article reads, officials in Zimbabwe recently said the country will work with the International Atomic Energy Agency and likely with investment from Russia to develop a nuclear program in the country. Zimbabwe is joining other African nations exploring nuclear power as a way to help solve chronic problems with electrical supply. Demand for power continues to increase on the continent due to growing populations and economic expansion.
Now, we have been telling you about Putin's growing footprint in Africa. Let's take a look at yet another such chapter. Zimbabwe is turning to Russia for nuclear power. A new deal puts Putin at the center of Zimbabwe's energy ambitions. Zimbabwean officials say their country will work with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, to develop a nuclear program, and Russia will likely invest in this program. Zimbabwe is joining other African countries looking for solutions to chronic electricity shortages. Power demand has been growing across the continent, and Zimbabwe's partnership could shape its energy future. Zimbabwe has set the target to increase its power generation to at least 4 gigawatts by the year 2035. To achieve this, it will collaborate with Russia to build small nuclear reactors. And the IAEA has agreed to help Zimbabwe through this process. However, current data shows that Zimbabwe's daily power generation is about half of the capacity. Russia is expected to step in here. A 2021 agreement with Russia's state-owned nuclear company, Rosatom, is expected to lay the groundwork for this. Now, experts say this could provide millions of people in rural and remote areas with access to reliable power. Right now, South Africa is the only African country with a nuclear power plant, but more are in the works. Unlike solar and wind, which require large swathes of land, nuclear energy can generate electricity from small fuel sources. This makes it a strong option for countries with limited space. The World Bank categorizes Zimbabwe as a lower middle-income country. It has strong potential for economic growth because of its educated workforce, along with its natural resources. The current government is aiming for an upper middle income status by the year 2030, and nuclear power could help it achieve this goal. By helping Zimbabwe grow nuclear power, Russia is strengthening its strategic foothold on the continent. It has similar deals with Egypt, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and South Africa. So Putin is expanding his reach through energy partnerships. He is positioning himself as an important energy provider. By backing nuclear projects, it ensures African nations rely on Russia's expertise, technology, and funding.
Merci beaucoup. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Namaste, Mr. President.
Bharat Kelogon.
Ugh, Marcone. But anyway, my final thoughts. Russia is creating a critical infrastructure need within Zimbabwe. This will help expand their economy and open up different business opportunities. High energy consuming industries like manufacturing and data centers may be more likely to locate in a country with a robust nuclear power infrastructure. Technological innovation in a nutshell, leading to job creation and economic growth. Furthermore, developing and exporting nuclear technology can also stimulate innovation and research and development within a country, creating a new market opportunity in related fields. Okay, family, this is all I have. I hope this was a good broadcast, and hope this conveys the message of why we're needed and why Quest Unite Africa was created. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to send a gift or, a donation, please check out the Quest Unite Africa site. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And also, if you would like to volunteer, you could do that as well. I will put that in the chat, and just let me know how I can make this presentation better, because feedback is always needed, and I'm just working on getting better at conveying the news and why it's so important. And I hope this inspires you to start aligning your thoughts and hearts on the continent and working with our brothers and sisters. And you enjoy your Friday and your Shabbat and your weekend. I will see you next week. And, I wasn't able to, report a lot of other news, but it's no surprise Zimbabwe is now trying to join BRICS, and I will be talking about that next week. Shalom, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.